if you are of African descent in any kind of way, then you are all brothers and sisters. And I have to agree with you with that, regardless of where we are, our geographical location. And my reason for saying that is I know, based on my research, as far as our historical records, we know that the ancient Kemetans are the people that we refer to today as the ancient Egyptians. Were the only people in the history of the world on the planet that had a written language. And we know that no one else other than them had that. And we judge history by four components, and that's time, people, places, and events. So with that in mind, we start from there. And if you could tell us about the African influence on scriptures, we're all listening, and you got it, my brother.
Okay, thank you. Let me say this, because you made a very important point. You said that the ancient Egyptians were the only people with a written record. Now, that has been a school of thought, that many have promoted. But what we must make very clear to all who are listening in, and I'm sure this is something you're very aware of, when we use that word Egyptian, it tends to make the mind go to a small geographical location in East Africa, when in fact the whole landmass of Africa, when we say Kemet or Kami or Tamare, it was referring, when we reference it as the Holy Coptic Church, we're talking about the entire landmass from as far north as Libya to as far south as South Africa and Botswana and Tanzania, to as far west as Gambia and Ghana and Nigeria, to as far east as Sudan and Djibouti. We're in Central Africa, for that matter, the Congo and Angola. All of our tribes, see, the myth that has been promoted is that we as African or Tamarian or Nubian Melanite people, and this applies to our brothers and sisters from Latin America, known as the Amexim or the Aztec or the Arawak, we did in fact have a written language. And let me tell you why I'm saying that. When we look at what they've recently discovered over the last 2 years over in Mali, they found what is now being referenced as the Malian records. And they're saying these are records that are over 5,000 to 7,000, some even date them as 10,000 years old. And they're saying that these cities older than Timbuktu, which rivaled Mesopotamia, had records, had information, and and this is not me saying, these are people from Yale University, Europeans, and they're saying the problem was so many scholars did not want to admit that these people in the western coast of Africa and Central Africa and Southern Africa, who looked more black, as you would have it, or purple black or blue black, did not have any sciences or any knowledge or any information. We had written records. They found the Malian papyruses. They're saying there's hundreds of thousands of these papyruses. This was discovered 3 years ago, and the scholars are all trying to go and actually take them, and thanks, be to the Most High that our people there have enough sense now to say, no, we're not giving it to you. We're going to decipher our own records, and we did have a written language. There's tribes in West Africa like the Va, which have a script called Va. We can go online, Google it, pull up the pictures, pull up the images, and realize we did have a written record. What happened was when we came in contact with the various invasions from Europe, the various invasions from the so-called Arab world, as it's called today, and the various invasions from the so-called East Indians, or those coming from those lands of Hind, when we were faced with that, we did like the people in Mali who've recently been discovered. They put these records under their houses and buried them and protected them in canisters because they knew everyone was searching for that information to find out things that we kept secret. And so when they got there, oftentimes, like it's happened today, they believed, they only have oral traditions. No, we as Africans have more than oral traditions. We have written records. The Zulu have a script. Everyone, we all have various scripts which we use, but as a result of these scripts, or the result of us protecting these scripts, dare I say, so many have been made to feel that we don't have written records. But with that being said, when we speak of the scriptures, what often happens, for example, is let's say Genesis. Depending on who you talk to, they'll say Genesis. If I speak to a so-called Jew out of Russia or out of Israel, they'll say Genesis was originally called Bereshith. And they'll say that it is a Jewish scripture. Others will say, no, the word is genealogy of Isis, genealogy of Isis. Now, you have two different schools of thought, two different systems there. One is saying, no, this is speaking about the records of an ancient African ruler, female ruler known as Isis or Aset. And another would say, no, this is the records of 4,000 years old given by a man named Moses, the beginning and the creation of humanity. Now, where do the two meet? That's the dilemma. The reality is the original scriptures, the original books of the Bible made it very clear what we as African people believed. And when we're looking at the books of Genesis, and this is not something that I'm even saying, Zondervan, which is a Bible or religious publication company, it's been around many, many years. Zondervan, which is, your listeners can type in Zondervan, Zondervan Bible, they themselves have said that the Bible as it's being held today, they themselves have said, and this is for all of you listening to us on Blog Talk, they themselves have admitted, and I'll go right to it, and this is King James Version Zondervan Study Bible, and this is copyright 1999, and they're saying right here very clearly, for example, they say the Amaana letters, hundreds of letters written primarily by Canaanite scribes, illuminate social, political, and religious relationships between Canaan and Egypt during the reigns of Amenhotep III and Akhenaten. They also mention here Amenhotep's wisdom, ancient African records, 30 chapters of wisdom instructions which were taken to produce the books of Proverbs from chapters 22 to Proverbs chapter 24. This is what they're admitting. They have here the Babylonian Theodicy. They're saying these are records of a sufferer and his friend which were taken and rewritten to create the book of Job. And this continues. There's literally about 50 of them here that they're honestly and straightforward admitting. The book, they say, Senuhi's story, an Egyptian official of the 12th dynasty, goes into voluntary exile in Syria and Canaan during the Old Testament, from which the story of Joseph was taken and created. Now, I read that, and I hope your listeners will go and seek out that Zondervan King James Study Bible 1999 copyright so they can read it for themselves. But we're saying that because these scholars, when they reference these books, when they say Amenhotep or Akhenaten, Akhenaten was an African. He wasn't an Egyptian. Egypt is in Africa. They wouldn't have called themselves Egyptians. So being an African, these were African records, just like the Malian records are African records. These were African records talking about events that took place amongst us that the Greeks and the Romans got their hands on and misinterpreted, or dare I say reinterpreted, to give Greek and Romans more influence, more power, more say-so, and an actual place at a table that originally they didn't sit at.
Okay, now
go ahead.
Let me say something for a moment so we can get this firmly fixed in the listener's mind. Now, when I mentioned ancient Kemet and I used the word Egypt, the reason I'm doing that is because this is something that most people are familiar with. So when you say that ancient Kemet, and we're talking about Egypt for those of you who are listening, had at one portion we had the Sudan, the other portion we had Ethiopia, and then we had what you're saying is this is a Commonwealth region inclusive to all the various tribes, including Mali and the other tribes, tribal areas that you mentioned. This is all included in this, and all of these people are African.
That's correct. And they're one family, different tribes and clans. And here's the trick. The Greco-Romans, what they
I'm here. I'm listening.
The Greco-Romans, what they did to us was they made it appear when they said 12 tribes, they say 12 tribes and make the 12 tribes, that very name, the trick is the word tribe. You see, when we say 12th dynasty, the trick is the word dynasty. As the original people of the scriptures, we would have never used the word dynasty. You follow?
Okay.
Because that word it's a Greek word. So why would these original tribes? I'm sorry?
Okay. Go ahead with that thought, and after you do that, I have another question. But go ahead and finish your sentence.
Right. So we're saying, why would we, as African people, utilize the word dynasty, right? Which there even online etymological dictionary says dynasty. Earlier dynastia, from Middle French dynastia, and directly from the late Latin dynastia, from Greek dynastenia, meaning power, lordship, sovereignty, ruler, chief. But why would these ancient African people they would have never called themselves dynasty, because these are Greek, Latin, Middle French words, which they didn't speak. So if we look at what they're calling the so-called 12th dynasty and reference them by what they would have attributed to themselves being the 12 tribes, then we realize that so-called 12th dynasty with Akhenaten and Amenemhet and Muntu Hotep and Hatshepsut and Nefertiti, that they were in fact the 12 original royal tribes, and that the Greeks and Romans who were coming in under the name 12 tribes were in fact the biblical 12 dynasties of Canaan. You see the trick?
Okay. I see exactly what you're saying. Now, let me ask you this, Reverend Hotep. Now, you're saying to us that prior to what we have today, that most of us know of as the Holy Scriptures, was in fact records, ancient records of the Africans that Europeans derived and concocted a story from.
That is correct. And the beauty of the way you just put it is, you're not saying it, I'm not saying it, Bible scholars are saying it. European and those of European background Bible scholars are admitting that these things come out of Tamare. These things come out of, even when they say the Babylonian records, according to the so-called biblical scholars, we learned that the cities of Babel and Nineveh and Calneh, that these were cities established by an individual referenced in the Bible as being known as Nimrod, and they say Nimrod was the son of Cush, and all Bible scholars say Cush references the land of Ethiopia, and so Nimrod comes out of a family of Ethiopians, and Cush is the son of Ham, which the Bible scholars would say Ham is the black race. So if Nimrod is the son of Cush, which is Ethiopia, and Ethiopia comes out of Ham, which is Africa, then in fact Nimrod was an ancient Cushite Babylonian, thereby an African.
Okay.
You see.
Let me ask you this, because I've been doing quite a bit of research, and first of all, I highly recommend to the listening audience a book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Walter Williams, and he wrote The Historical Origin of Christianity, and that book is written by Walter Williams. But in his book, he states the following. He said the Greeks never had an alphabet, and that Johannes Gutenberg in 1437 created the first printing press with removable print, and of course we know that the Chinese had created one in the 13th century, but it is at that time that we get a lot of what we have today and we know of today as Christianity, and it's been done from a Eurocentric position. So my question to you is, in your opinion, do you think Europeans created history using a Bible that they had created earlier, to, we would say, as a foundation for what we have and what we know of today as his story. Would it be safe to say that is some of what is taking place as well?
Yes. What has taken place is they have taken the original books and records of the Bible, knowing that we as a people coming out of South America, we had records. So they remember when they did what was called cultural diffusion, where they would come and live amongst the various tribes of Latin America, or they would come and live amongst the various tribes of North America, or they came and lived amongst the various tribes of Africa. Whenever they lived amongst us, they didn't just come in and start warring. They would come and live amongst you. Study what your tribal traditions were. Study what your opinions were. Study your medicine. Study your diet. Study your music. Study your dress. Study everything about you. And then figured how to take what you taught and merge it in a way that your inner being would respond to their translation and interpretations of their so-called Bibles or scriptures, but your mind would never really be at peace because something about the story just doesn't fit. Okay. Well, again, this when we, as a few moments ago, I was mentioning when we talk about these tribes. So when we talk about, we say the original 3 groups of 12 royal families that came out of Tamaray. And out of these 3 groups of 12 royal families, you see, because if I speak to my brothers and sisters that are Christians or Hebrews or Muslims or Muslims or whatever names that follow the Bible or the Quran, if I say to them Israel, they will say yes. If I say Israeli, they'll say yes. If I say Israel, they'll say yes, believing without knowing that all 3 of those are in fact the same. The word Israel is the English interpretation. When I say Israeli, I'm referencing a group of people coming out of European or Russian, European, Germanic stock who call themselves Jews today. If I say Israel, I'm talking about ancient African people. Now, what is the similarity and where are the differences? When I look, for example, at any Jewish person who's a Hasidim, and they go to make their morning prayer, those at the Wailing Wall over in Israel today, they put this black box on their forehead, and they tie this leather strap around their arm. And this black box is called tefillah, and they make their prayer. But when I go back to the records of the ancient Africans, I look for a drawing of this individual, many call Isis, who we know as the Blessed Mother, Aset Miriam, right? Or Miriam is her name, and we find she also wears a black box or step on her head. When I look at so-called Judaism today, I see at the door, on the right side of every door, except for closets and bathrooms of every Jewish home, they have this thing called a mezuzah. And it has on it a Hebrew letter Shin, and it's supposed to stand for the word Shaddai, and the witness, and it's there, and it's supposed to have inside of it a parchment from Deuteronomy stating, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God. You should love that Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul," etc. And it's supposed to be the power of this name. You follow? But when I go to Tamaray, I found this same precept of a name being put inside of a symbol that Greeks and Romans call a cartouche, or a chinook, we call it. And inside of this cartouche, the name for blessings and protections of different angelic beings are placed in. When I go to so-called Judaism, I see that so-called Jews in their original teachings, they fall on their face in prayer. When I go to Tamaray in Africa, I find the falling on the face, prostration in prayer. When I go to the Christian European translation of the book of Revelations, I hear about 7 angels blowing 7 horns or 7 trumpets. But when I go amongst the Ashanti people of West Africa, they have a ritual every year where they're blowing, 7 men are blowing 7 horns to bring in the Ashanti New Year of celebration. So many of these rituals that we've come to believe as Nubian Melanites that are not ours but are in fact Jewish or Christian or Islamic or Muslim in background are in fact taken right out of Africa. It's just that we haven't been made to see that aspect. We've just been told, well, Akhenaten or Akhenaten, he came to power and he removed all of the gods of Egypt and he gave all power just to the Aten. But no one has ever stopped and say, why was he doing away with all of the gods of Egypt, as they call it? They'll say, well, he's the founder of monotheism.
Okay.
We say, no, he could not have been the founder. Go ahead.
Okay, I have another question. I'm absolutely in agree with you. We know that in his book, Stanley Lane Poole, The Moors in Spain, he makes the statement that as early as the 10th century, the populace of Europe could neither read nor write. And he also goes on further to say that we had kings who were illiterate, and they lived in big barns with hole in the roof, opposed to living in the castles and stuff that we see on television today for the emission of smoke. So it is easy for us to realize when we have this background information that the Europeans they were illiterate people. So, in your opinion, this is my question. In your opinion, where was the first time, and when was the first time, and by who, and what geographical location did Europeans come into some type of enlightenment?
Well, when you say European people, again, this is something we have to be very careful of. Just as we don't like to just be grouped as African people or as Caribbean people or as Latin American people or as Native American people, just as we understand or overstand that there are various tribes and clans and families amongst us, we have to also do our homework on the history of those who invaded our lands. You have the Germanic people, and they had one system of belief, and they invaded certain lands in Africa or Tamare and came in contact that way to knowledge or information. And they had their own Germanic belief systems of the Norse gods and the Viking gods of Thor and Odin and Loki, and they had their own teachings on that. And they actually rejected the spread of Christianity as it was being done by the Roman Catholic Church. They actually rejected it. Then when you go down to France, you find the Teutonic people. And they were into the worship because they came into areas that you know as today as Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia and Libya. They came into contact with those who resided there, those Nubian Melanites as Africans or Tamarian people. They came into contact with our family members there and took back the knowledge of the acknowledgement of the earth goddess or the mother goddess or the mother principle of the acknowledgement of Mother Earth. They too rejected the spread by the Roman Empire, by way of the Roman Catholic Church, of Roman invasion or Romanized teachings. Now, the so-called Roman Empire, they originally had their own system of belief. They rejected the Greek system, but when Rome started to fall, they picked up. Because remember, the Greeks had the Olympians, led by Zeus and his wives and children, and the Romans had their Roman interpretation of Greek teachings, but they had what was called the Pantheon. You follow? This is important that we as Nubian Melanites not just do our homework as to who we are, but we must understand the mindset of those who kidnapped, enslaved us, or whatever the case may be, and know their religion. Because many people say, oh, Greek mythology. It was not mythology to the Greeks. So when you ask, where did the Europeans come in contact with knowledge or information, it depended on which land, which coastal land they invaded. Because they went all around the coast of Africa, and they invaded different lands at different time periods.
Okay.
You follow?
Well,
so when you say the first, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You have answered that question tremendously. That was an excellent answer in regards to that question. You go ahead, and later I'll have another question for you. But go ahead and finish what you were saying.
So when we say, where did the Europeans come in contact first, we have to go, if we go biblically or scripturally, as it's called today, we have to look at the 11 or 12 tribes of Canaan. I say 11 because the Bible says 11 tribes in Genesis 10, but then they mention the other group called the Hittites, who also came in, known as the Hurrians or Mitanni. So that would make your 12 dynasties of Europe falsely called 12 tribes today. And the first amongst that group that entered into the land of Africa was done under Alexander the Greek. Alexander the Greek, and I didn't say the Great for those who are listening, Alexander the Greek was a part of a European system that was bent or was focused on infiltrating Africa. And they came into Africa into what people are calling today as Upper Egypt. You follow? Prior to Alexander the Greek, you had the invasions that were done by those who today are called the Hyksos, of which he was of that family. They say the shepherd kings. You know he's of that family because all of them bear a certain title. Alexander the Greek was a Constantinius. Constantine of Rome was a Constantinius. Flavius Josephus Piso was a Constantinius. They all bore a certain name that identified them with being with a certain line coming out of Europa that was bent on invading Africa for the purposes of resources and knowledge. Okay. But that was one group. You go ahead.
Reverend Hotep, I have another question here. I have a problem with English names such as Joseph and James and Jesus and Jacob and Jew, and the reason why, and this is going to be a two-part question, the reason why is we learned through research that the alphabet J wasn't created until the as early as the latter half of the 16th century. So you mentioned Flavius Josephus, who wrote the book The Antiquities of the Jews and Wars of the Jews, and you also earlier mentioned Babylon as an existing place, and I would also like to add Persia in there. It is my understanding, based on the research that I have, that there was never a such place as Babylon or Persia, and there were no Persians. Can you elaborate on that and clear that up for us? If you've touched on that in doing your research and stuff, what kind of enlightenment can you shed on that?
Okay, let me address the first part, then we'll do the second. So the second part is about Babylon. Now, the first part you mentioned about names such as Jesus and James and Joseph. What often happens, let's take the name, for example, Joseph. The name Joseph, in Hebrew, they'll say Yasuf or Yusuf. James, they will say Yaakov. Jesus, they will say Yeshua. Now, when I look, just for example, at the name Jesus, I have to acknowledge that the Greeks and Romans influenced what we're calling modern Christianity today directly. Admittedly, New Testament, Ephesians, Thessalonians, Galatians, all of these were Greek isles, Greek city-states. As such, when I look at the name, for example, Jesus, I have to acknowledge that the Greeks had their high god Zeus, and the Romans had their high god Jupiter. And if I take the name of the Roman high god established by the Roman Catholic Church, Jupiter, the Jew part, and I add that Jew part to Zeus, I come up with the compound name that many are falsely and unknowingly, in most cases, acknowledging as Jesus. Now, when we as the Holy Coptic Church speak about Yeshua, we literally say Yeshua, and we focus on the middle part or the root of the name, and that name is Shu. So it identifies this individual from coming from a family line out of Africa known as Shu and Tefnut. When we say Christ, we acknowledge that the word Christ existed in Tamaré as the word Karest, and it has to do with the Ka, spirit, and Rast, from where the Hebrews get the word Rosh, from Rosh Hashanah, and the Arabs get the word Rais, meaning the anointed one who baptizes, or the head spirit. When we speak of Yeshua, we're making reference to an individual known as Tut Ankh Aten, which name the biblical scholars and all Egyptologists admit means the living image of the Lord. We acknowledge that Aten, A-T-O-N, or some write it as A-T-E-N, or others write it as A-T-U-N, that Aten in the English, the T and the D were interchangeable, so Aten becomes Adon, from where we get the word Adon as in Adonai, the Lord. And this individual, being of the line of the high priest and prophet Akhenaten, being of that line, when it says Akhenaten came in to remove the gods of Egypt, he was removing those gods that had been influenced, or those angelic beings, or those schools of thought, or those dogmas that had been influenced by India, that had been having people worship animals, which we didn't worship any animal, or that had been influenced by those from Europa, and he was removing them out to clean and renew as one of the family members of the original three groups of 12 tribes of Tamaré of Africa, right, of Israel, Ishmael, and Midiani. He was removing those out and returning us back to our own old ways and our old scriptures. And afterwards, the child Tut Ankh Aten, which was the living image of the Lord, that the books of the Bible in Colossians says that Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God. And then his name would be later changed to Tut Ankh Amun, the child who holds the key to the hidden one. When we reference John, we know that the name John is the English. The name should have been the scribe disciple Ta'at'a, whose name was Yahannu. When you say in Hebrew, Yohanna, the word Yohanna comes from the ancient Tamaraic or ancient Nubic or ancient Arabic, whatever language, or Hebrew, the ancient script as Yahanu. The name Hanu, we find, is the transient spirit, the double portion of the spirit, which they talk about in the Bible, that Elijah blew on his disciple Elijah. And that John was supposed to be, John the Baptizer was supposed to be the return of Elijah, possessing the double spirit. But these were African records and have to be redone, retranslated, reinvestigated, retaught from an African perspective. And when we do that, we'll find out what we're really dealing with. Now, to the second part of your question, you mentioned about the Europeans, and you were asking, I want to make sure specifically, you asked the question saying, what was it, or is it true that there was no land of Babylon? The reality is there was a land of Babylon, but not called Babylon. There was a land of Bab-Ilion. And Bab-Ilion, Bab represented a doorway or a gateway to the highest state or highest mind or highest mentality. Many of what happens is the Bible scholars took people who were names that were of people and made them cities, took names that were of cities and made them names. For example, they say the tribe of Levi of the European 12 dynasties, but when in fact there was a city directly across from the city of Amaana that was called Levi, where we as Africans established our records on the Nile. There was an African city named Levi. You follow? And the word Levi amongst us was called Lawi, L-A-W-I, as in the African nation you find today as Malawi, M-A-L-A-W-I. So the people of Malawi, if you go and look at their flag, you see on their flag they have stars, six-pointed stars, the so-called Jews stole. They have pyramids, which identifies that they knew who they were. We were those original families. Babylon, Bab-Ilion existed, but not as it's called today. When they call it today Iraq, E-R E-C-H in the Bible that people mispronounce as Iraq. You asked about the Persians. The word Persian, no, not the word Persian, they were called Farsi. Because in their language, and these are the people you call Iranians today or Aryans today, because the word Iran or Iranian is nothing but the word Aryan. Those were your original Aryan groups who came down out of Europa into the land of Asia, as it's called today. And when they got there, they were speaking a language that's today, that's why so many Iranians will say, we're not Arabs, we're not Arabs. And they speak a language called Farsi, Farsi. They don't speak Arabic. They don't identify themselves as being Arabs. And the world has to be made to recognize these differences. And these Iranians, if you look at them, you see Europeans, you see Armenians, you see Greeks. If you just look at Ahmadinejad and those people from Iran today, you're looking at European stock. They migrated out of Europa down into Asia and spread throughout the Arab world, up the Hijaz. Some went down further into India, and they suppressed the original blue-black and brown-skinned people, Nubian Melanites, who established the Harappan civilizations on the Indus River Valley, because these invaders established their land at the Ganges River in India, suppressed us, pushed us down further into southern, what they call in India today, labeled us untouchable, labeled us Dalit, labeled us all of these names because of their caste system, and that's where that doctrine would then pick up. And as a matter of fact, we did an entire book called How Egyptian and Sumerian Realities Became the Bible's Mythology. For those who are listening, if they're interested, we invite them to please go to our website, www.journeyhomegroup.com, and seek out the book, Egyptian and Sumerian Realities.
Okay. Reverend Hotep, I have another question for you. Now, we have here in the United States of America, we have the Christian religion. And my question to you is, was there ever a historical figure by the name, a person, a living, breathing person who actually lived at any given point in time on this earth as Jesus Christ?
Not the way the Bible scholars of European heritage are teaching it. If they're talking about the original sacrificial shepherd, the original doctrine of an individual giving his life for his family, that is an African precept coming out of the line of Asaru, who many call Osiris today, who gave his life so that his family could live, and out of that family line came those who are self-sacrificing in nature, and such as Tutankhaten, who is the Yeshua out of Tamaré. Because remember, the Bible, there's a problem in the Bible. At one spot they say, "Behold, I call my son out of Egypt," which you know is Africa. At another spot it says Jesus of Nazareth, who's born in Nazareth of Judea, in the land of Jerusalem. There's two different people. Because one was, when you speak about Judea and Jerusalem, you're talking about those who were under Roman rule and under Greek rule. When you speak about coming out of Africa, you're speaking about those who come out of the land going down the Nile River and the Niger River Valley, those people. When we're speaking about the real and living Messiah who picked up the cross as the symbol of the Ankh, of being willing to sacrifice himself, because that original Ankh was the symbol of male and female reproductive abilities, where a female gives of her life, gives of her essence to bring a child forth, and comes very close to death and losing all of the nutrients and elements and chemicals that are necessary to sustain her own life. And a male gives of his life when he ejaculates the semen so that the child may live. That was the original symbol. And so when they say pick up your cross, they were talking about that Ankh, that key of eternal life, because by way of your children and your progeny, your eternal life was given. So was there a Yeshua of the line of Shu out of Africa, whose name was Tutankhaten, of the family line of the original sacrificial shepherd Asaru, out of the line of the Miriam of his day? Nefertiti, and out of the line of the high priest, seer, and prophet Akhenaten, coming out of the line of the great African rulers and princesses and prince? Yes. But if we're talking about the Greco-Roman interpretation of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed individual who comes down from the clouds and walks on water and is going to save the world, especially those of us of the diaspora, no, that is Greek and Roman dogma meant to further enslave our people. We just have to be able to make that separation. Well, no, the Creator or the Most High Heavenly One, and notice I did not say Most High Heavenly Father, because to just say Most High Heavenly Father is to make the Most High less than what the Most High is supposed to be. And I say that because if we were to be in a room and we were able to ask all of the listeners face to face, when you say Father, describe Father, they would say, well, Father, protector, disciplined, a person who disciplines you, provider, worker. You follow? Now, are those attributes of the Most High? Yes. But are not there also attributes like yielder, merciful, loving, kind, nurturing, etc., a part of the Most High? And they would have to say yes. And are those not passive, not as in weak, but passive as in polarity or feminine polarities? They would have to say yes. So we say the Most High Heavenly One, that is N-A-Ray, A-N-N-A-A-Y, Ray, the highest that is not but the source, the highest that exists, the highest that encompasses the feminine and masculine polarities or feminine and masculine attributes or feminine and masculine elements or feminine and masculine components. When we use the word God, we are coming from the German Gut, G-H-U-T-T, and it basically is a German word which aligns us with German teachings or spirituality or ideologies for that matter, or even the word guardian, protector. Now, the gods, and even in Psalms, I think 82, verse 6, is all of you are gods and children of the Most High, and that's in English. But in the Hebrew, they'll say Elohim. That's from the Hebrew, representing a group of beings. We simply say the guardian angelic host who are sent by way of the Most High Heavenly One and moves within, through, and around us at all times. We are not limited to just this word God based off of someone else's interpretation, because Michelangelo, when he drew the picture of the Sixtine Chapel, he drew God creating Adam, and it is a European hand creating a European man. But that had nothing to do with you and me. You follow?
I follow you. Okay, Reverend Hotep, you are the author of several books. Could you tell us what those books are and how the listening audience can get a hold of those books?
Sure. Some of the books, and it's not just myself, there's other sisters and brothers who've been directly involved in authoring some of the publications as well, and so I will never try to take credit like I'm doing everything. I'm just a person like anyone else that's doing my best to fill the piece that I may come to specialize in as far as religion or history. Now, some of the books we've put out were Children's Fairy Tales, Breed Adult Religions, which goes and addresses the so-called influences of fairy tales on the Greco-Roman or European interpretations of the Bible. Another is called The Miraculous Healing Herbs of Imhotep, and that parchment deals is over 490-something pages. It deals with the various herbs that Imhotep, the father of medicine out of Africa, recorded, and certain Greeks or certain Germans have as the Ebers Papyrus today and the Edwin Papyruses. We went through it to bring some of those cures which our people, and I say our people, I mean humanity, most specifically Nubian Melaninites, would need today. We've also put out a parchment called Solar Biology or Lunar Astrology, which deals with the original precepts out of ancient Africa of how we acknowledge the movement of the celestial bodies and the influences they had. Because for each of us to be born, the universe had to align in such a way to allow us to be able to come through. That's just 3 of about maybe 30 somewhat that are on the site. And recently the one that I'm most proud of is the original books of the Bible, where we took the first papyrus of the 19 papyruses of the original books of the Bible, went back through them into the language, the translation, and gave biblical reference to everything. For example, there's a big split today between so-called scientists and so-called religionists. One group says evolution or creationism, and one group says evolution, and there's a debate. When, in fact, when we look at the Bible, for example, the Bible does speak about an ice age in the book of Job, because it says the face of the waters of the earth was nothing but a deep ice. So there's the ice age mentioned there. All of the things as far as evolution, as it's called, you follow, does not really go against Scripture if we think about it. Because Scripture will say, no, God created man from the dust of the earth. But yet we have to acknowledge that dust of the earth had bacteria that were in it. And if it had bacteria that were in it, then those bacteria were already devolving and growing and evolving. As such, evolution was utilized, the chemicals, the elements, the gases, the formulas, by these ancient African angelic hosts sent by the Most High Heavenly One as alchemy, from where you get the word chemist or alchemist or chemet. They were utilizing these things to bring life forth. You follow? And this is what the Bible meant, let us make man. So some group of beings were responsible for making human beings. You see? So that's just another one of the parchments we've put out. We've also put out the original 12 tribes of the Scriptures, which speaks about who the original 12 tribes are by name, where they are found scattered around the world today because of the various kidnappings and enslavements. All of these things we're doing not to say we have all the answers. I like to always make that very clear. We do not claim to have all the answers, because there are 7 billion people on the planet, and it is impossible for any man, woman, child, or otherwise to say that they have the answers for everybody's problems without having gone to everyone's land and seen everyone's conditions and discussed everyone's mentality. Instead, we say, for those who seek a true religious identity, who seek to find out if you're into the Scriptures or if you're into to consciousness, but you still have an affinity to the Scriptures because of grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and what they taught you, then that's what we're about. And for those who would listen and say, well, I disagree, we thank them for disagreeing, and we thank them for still giving us the time to listen, because even in disagreeing, it at least shows that they're thinking enough to be able to disagree, and we always welcome that. So as far as all of the listings of books and CDs and DVDs and things that we put out, as far as the Holy Coptic Church of the Black Messiah, we invite them always to go to our website, which is www.journeyhomegroup.com, and they can also call us at 813-741-0922, or email us at journeyhomegroup@aol.com.
Okay, Reverend Hotep. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you all heard that, and to get a hold to Reverend Hotep's information. He's given you access to him. And I'm going to go on with another question now. And we are well into the second hour, and I think this thing is going pretty good. You breaking it down, and you've given us all the access to the information. I noticed that you have mentioned several times the word Europa, and could you give us a breakdown on the meaning of that word, Europa?
When we say Europa, spelled EUROPA, because this is the name that the land that many are calling Europe today was originally called, Europa. And it's important that we say it that way, because when we research Europa, we find out it was the name of a sea nymph, a nymphomaniac. In Greek and Roman mythology, Europa was a sea nymph who copulated with Zeus. So when you use the name Europa, you are acknowledging, Europeans are acknowledging coming out of Greek and Roman mythology, or Greek and Roman influence, by the mere title Europa. But if we just say Europe, we never hear it. Now, biblically, this land of Europa is, in fact, the land of Nod, which a lot of people don't realize. This is why the land you're calling Sweden today is nothing but Southwest Eden. They have their own doctrine. If you go on the internet, on Google, and type in original tribes, 12 tribes of Europe, they say that they are the original tribes of the scriptures. That the nation of Britain, from the word Brit, meaning covenant, that they, through the queen's line, because remember the queen broke away, and I'm not talking about the queen today, I'm talking about when they broke away, when Henry VIII broke away because he divorced Catherine of Spain and the Catholic Church denounced him. They broke away and formulated the Anglican Church of the Anglo-Saxons, and the Anglican Church created, by way of King James later on, the King James version of the Bible, because King James was an Anglican, which many of us as Christians don't realize. Meanwhile, the Roman Catholic Church, or the Roman Orthodox Church, they were doing their translations by way of Constantine, Empress Irene, and them from 325 on. Meanwhile, the Greek Orthodox Church, they were doing their translations. And all of these translations are all around the world, but no one is asking, well, where are those books that are mentioned in the Bible? There's over 25 books in the Bible mentioned by name that we cannot find in the Bible. Somebody, Constantine, somebody, Irene, somebody, King James, somebody, Flavius Josephus Piso, either removed them or mistranslated them or influenced them in such a way that we would never find out that these people out of the land of Europa were in fact the tribes of Canaan, which Zondervan Bible admits to, which Ryrie Study Bible admits to, which the King James Key Study Bible, Hebrew Greek admits to. They admit that the tribes of Canaan were the tribes that came out of Europa. Now, please, we always want to make it clear. We're not saying this to say hate anybody. We're saying this to say find out who you are as a people so we can stop feeling like we've converted to someone else's religion and that we have to always take a backseat to some European or Hind or East Indian or Arab scholar when in fact you and I as Nubian Melaninites were the original scholars of Timbuktu, were the original scholars of Aksum in Ethiopia, were the original scholars of what they're calling Egypt today, were the original scholars of Nubia, were the original scholars of the Aztecs, were the original scholars of the Inca, were the original scholars of the Arawak, were the original scholars of the Carib. We were the original scholars of our respective tribes. We always had scribes. We always had chiefs. We always had councils. We always had advisors. We always had records. This was something we were known for wherever we were across the globe, and we were always one and the same people of different clans and families coming out of these original tribes.
Okay, Brother Reverend. My next question has caused an enigma throughout the years, and I want to see if you can shed some light on that. And Atlantis. Many people say that the Africans occupied Atlantis as well. And we do know that I'm here down in Florida, that off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean is a 400-foot high pyramid. Could you shed some light on Atlantis?
Well, when we look at the word Atlantis, Lemuria, Nippon, Ascalon, these were sacred cities that they have to now admit because they are unearthing cities. Like I said, even in Mali, they unearthed a massive city larger than Mesopotamia. You can go on YouTube and just type in Great Malian City Uncovered or Discovered, and they say older than Mesopotamia. And they're saying that these ancient cities had records, had sciences, had information. But no, the problem that everyone is having is that the people who resided there and do still reside there happen to look like you and me, happen to have melanin, whether yellow melanin, greenish melanin, brown, reddish melanin, blue, black, purple melanin. They have and had melanin, and this is the problem the world is having. If these were European people, they would not have hesitated to say, oh, we found Atlantis, we found Lemuria, we found Ascalon. But because these are melaninite people, they have to make it the lost cities. The name Atlantis, or some say Utla, it means vacation, a vacation place, okay? But they go even further into the name Atlan. These were, remember, at one time the entire planet was of one landmass called Pangea or Pangea. And this one landmass had sacred cities. And the original inhabitants of this one landmass had to have been Nubian Melanite people. Not something I'm saying. This is something so-called geologists and geneticists are saying. They're saying the first people to walk this planet were Melanite people, had melanin in their skin, were Nubian people. If you don't want to say Africa because the land was Pangaea, according to them, fine, then call it Pangaea. But those people of Pangaea, if you want to say Pangaeans, right, those Pangaeans or Pangaeans were in, or Pygmy people, were in fact Nubian Melanite people. And these cities of Atlantis and Lemuria and Nippon and Ashkelon, or as our great Baba and teacher, Dr. Ben called it, Ashkelon or Akubaland, these were the cities that everyone from the lands of Europa, from the lands of Hind, were trying to find. They were trying to find your records, but yet you and I as African people, or Tamarian people, or Hispanic people, or Latino people, or Caribbean people, or Black American, or Negro people, right, brothers and sisters, we don't want to identify with it for fear of letting go of our religion. And the other side of the coin is those who are so engulfed in it that there's no spiritual conscientiousness to show we were not just, we did have a religion in ancient Africa. We had religion, not religion by what they're calling it, where they separate their religion from their state. Our religion and our state were one. Akhenaten had, according to them, the founder of monotheism. We say the founder of atonism, or better yet, the one who resurrected atonism in and around 3,500 years to 2,000 years ago. And this is what we're making reference to.
Okay. That is an excellent answer, Reverend Hotep. I had came across a letter that was supposedly written by one Christopher Columbus. Today we know him as Christopher Columbus, upon his first visit to Africa. He wrote the following, that never before have I ever seen a people as beautiful as these, and everything they do with a smile. Even the lowest one of them are better than our highest aristocrat, and they love their neighbor as they self. Now, my question is, prior to Europeans bringing Christianity or religion into Africa, it seems to me that we already had something. And what I'm, based on the studies that I have, it is a indwelling spiritualism. Would it be safe to say that that is what the Africans had instead of religion?
Well, yes. Let's look at it this way. The word religion, I think, is what oftentimes the debate or the confusion comes in. Religion, to bind, to twist, religios, religion. So by that word, that's why we say true religious identity. What does that simply mean? A true religion that I can identify with. A true spirituality. If I say spirituality, then it goes into, well, what type of spirituality? A true spirituality that I can identify with. You follow? And we as Africans did have that. We had the precept of family lines. We had the precept of angelic beings, whether we want to call those angelic beings Neteru, whether we want to call those angelic beings Orisha, whether we want to call those angelic beings Namos, whether we want to call those angelic beings Ilikbare, whether we want to call those angelic beings different names, or angels. When we translate it as angelic guardians or guardian angelic hosts, is to make sure that our brothers and sisters that are Hebrew or Christian or Muslim don't have this thing where Egyptian gods, because once you hear gods, oh, blasphemy, you run from it. Those were Egyptian angels. Those statues were no different than the statues that the Vatican and the Catholic Church uses today. You see? So, yes, we did have our own spirituality. We did have our own true religious identity, which we identified with, where we did not look at the earth, that the earth was ours, and we were given dominion over the fish of the seas and the fowls of the air and everything that moves upon it. Instead, we saw ourselves as children of the earth. Tamarian precepts of true religious identity of atonism. Atonism teaches you are children of the earth. Monotheism teaches you were given dominion over the earth. Monotheism teaches over the fish, so you only see fish as food. Over the fowl, so you only see birds as food. Over the cattle and the goats, so you only see everything as food or made for your pleasure and your consumption. Atonism says no, the fish are not just made for food. The fish were made to keep the balancement, the equilibrium balanced of the waters of the planet, because it was understood that if the waters became unbalanced, diseases would begin, flooding would begin, the planet would be off. Much of what we're seeing happening today, where man has fished the oceans almost to extinction. So there is a difference. Atonism, true spirituality, true religious identity, as you say, a true spirituality, as you mentioned, Elder, we identify with that we as African people had true spirituality, and depending on which tribe of us you went amongst, our spirituality adapted to the environment we were in. What does that simply mean? If you lived up in the mountains, the sacred symbol or animal to you may have been a goat, because that was that which you used for milk, that which you used for skin, for warmth, that which you used for milk to drink or make cheese or to trade, etc. That was what you used. So your sacred symbol or your mascot was a goat. No different than the Florida Gators. The people that are Gator fans don't worship the alligator, I would hope. No difference than the people who are the Panthers, the Carolina Panthers. I hope they don't worship their mascot. Well, we as Africans, our mascots were based on our schools and universities that are falsely called pyramids to give us this pyramido Latin mentality instead of seeing them as universities. If they were universities, then these universities had schools, and these schools had sciences, and these sciences had places not called temples but called kanisa, places of worship from where you get the word church. We had these things, but when they play that game on words and say the Egyptian pyramids and the Egyptian temples, then we can never look at ourselves as Africans having churches, original churches, where we observed our original rites, and some were off in the woods, and our sacred symbols may have been an eagle or a falcon or a hawk or a lion or an elephant or an antelope or a zebra or a giraffe, based off, or a hippopotamus for that matter, based off of the environment that we were living in. These were tribes and families that had schools and education. We had languages and we had scripts. And there's no one who could say, well, what was the first language or what was the first script? That would limit us. We were many tribes and families. So to limit us to just say first script or first language, no, Europe had first language. Europe had first script. Africans and people of the Southern Americas and North America, we had various languages because we came in contact with various angelic beings.